The moment I knew they didn't understand what I actually did at Bravura Communications was when Mark Delaney, our golf-obsessed CEO, introduced me to a client as our computer girl. 11 years of maintaining their entire digital infrastructure, implementing security protocols that prevented 3 potentially devastating ransomware attacks, and custom building their authentication system from scratch, and I was the computer girl. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Samantha Lewis Sam to everyone except my mother and the IRS, and until last Friday. I was the sole IT administrator for Bravura Communications, a digital marketing firm in Minneapolis that somehow managed to attract high-paying clients despite being run by people who couldn't tell the difference between RAM and a random access memory joke. It was a typical Minnesota Friday in late October. The office was quieter than usual, as half the sales team had already disappeared for early weekend golf with clients. I was troubleshooting an issue with our backup server when my desk phone rang. "Sam, can you come to conference room B? Just a quick thing." Mark's voice had that false cheeriness that immediately set off alarm bells. I saved my work, locked my computer force of habit, and made my way past rows of empty desks. The fluorescent lights in the hallway flickered ominously. A maintenance issue I'd reported 3 times but was always deemed not a priority. Conference room B was our smallest meeting space, tucked away in the back corner of the office. When I opened the door, I found Mark sitting next to Trisha from HR. Trisha was staring intently at her tablet, refusing to make eye contact. A folder sat in the middle of the table like a landmine waiting to be triggered. "Sam, thanks for coming so quickly. Have a seat." Mark gestured to the chair across from them. I sat down, my face carefully neutral. 11 years in IT had taught me how to mask emotions with practiced efficiency. "So, Sam," Mark began, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "We've been reviewing our operational structure, and as part of a company-wide cost-saving initiative, we've made the difficult decision to restructure our IT department." I almost laughed. "Restructure our IT department? I am the IT department." "Exactly." Mark nodded as if I'd made his point for him. "And that's not sustainable for a growing company like Bravura. We need a more scalable solution. We're outsourcing IT functions to CloudServe." Trisha finally spoke, sliding the folder toward me. "They'll be taking over all systems maintenance starting Monday." "CloudServe," I repeated flatly. "The same company I warned you about 3 months ago when you first brought them up. The one with the data breach last year that exposed client information for 6 major firms." Mark's smile tightened. "They've addressed those issues, Sam. And their package is significantly more cost-effective than maintaining an in-house IT administrator." I opened the folder. Inside was a severance agreement offering 2 weeks' pay for every year of service, contingent upon a smooth transition and signing a non-disclosure agreement. "This is effective immediately," Trisha added. "Today, Friday at 4:30 p.m. is my last day." I asked, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. "We'll need you to hand over all access credentials and documentation before you leave today," Mark said, looking at his watch. "CloudServe will be implementing their systems over the weekend." I sat there, staring at the severance agreement, thinking about the countless nights and weekends I'd sacrificed to keep Bravura's systems running smoothly. I thought about the biometric authentication system I'd designed and implemented 3 years ago, the one I'd been begging them to upgrade for the past 6 months. "Mark," I said quietly, "our entire authentication infrastructure is built on a custom framework. It's not something an outside vendor can just take over without proper documentation and transition time. Which is why we need you to prepare that documentation today," he replied, glancing at his watch again. I almost laughed. "You want me to document 11 years of custom IT infrastructure development in the next 2 hours?" "Just the essential parts," Mark said dismissively. "The passwords, access codes, that sort of thing." I took a deep breath and closed the folder. "I'll prepare what I can." As I stood to leave, Mark added, "Oh, and Zam, we'll need you to turn in your security badge and laptop before you go." Trisha still wouldn't look at me. She'd been with the company as long as I had. We'd shared birthday lunches and holiday party small talk for over a decade, and now she couldn't even meet my eyes. I paused at the door and turned back. Just so you know, all authentication still runs on the legacy model I built, the one I've been asking to upgrade for months. I smiled thinly. Good luck with that. Back at my desk, I began methodically cleaning out my personal items. The small potted succulent Lila from marketing had given me last Christmas. Have you tried? Turning it off and on again, mug my niece had gifted me. The framed photo of my cat Pickles lounging across my keyboard at home, his favorite spot whenever I was trying to work. I thought about the systems I'd built and maintained single-handedly for over a decade. The authentication infrastructure with its quirks and patches, the backup server that needed constant coaxing, the custom scripts that kept everything running despite budget constraints that prevented proper upgrades. I could have sabotaged everything. A few keystrokes, and Bravura Communications would wake up Monday to digital chaos. But that wasn't my style. I didn't need to actively destroy anything. I just needed to stop holding it all together. I created a basic document listing the main system passwords and access protocols, the bare minimum that an outside IT provider would need. I deliberately omitted the workarounds and patches I'd implemented over the years to keep our outdated systems functioning. Not out of malice, but because documenting all of that would take weeks, not hours. I submitted my badge and laptop to security, nodded goodbye to the few colleagues still at their desks, and walked out of Bravura Communications for the last time. 11 years of dedication dismissed with a folder and a fake smile. As I drove home through the early evening traffic, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in years, I wouldn't be on call this weekend. My phone wouldn't ping with system alerts or frantic messages from employees who couldn't connect to the VPN. Monday's problems would be someone else's responsibility. Someone else who didn't know about the authentication time drift bug, or the backup server's tendency to hang unless manually restarted every 72 hours, or the dozens of other quirks I'd managed for years with custom scripts and regular maintenance. By the time I reached my apartment, the hurt and anger had faded into something like amusement. I greeted Pickles, my elderly, gray, long-haired cat who looked perpetually like a wise old man, with a scratch behind the ears. Guess what? Pickles. We're both unemployed now, I told him as he wound around my ankles. But at least one of us never had to work in the first place. I spent the weekend doing something I hadn't done in years, absolutely nothing related to Bravura Communications. I silenced my phone, ignored my email, and focused on cleaning my apartment, reading the novel that had been gathering dust on my nightstand, and giving Pickles the attention he clearly felt was long overdue. On Sunday evening, as I was sipping tea and watching Pickles doze on the windowsill, my phone buzzed with a text from Lila. Hey Sam, heard what happened. That was really shitty. Just wanted to say you'll be missed. Also, weird question. But do you know why all our company emails have stopped working? I smiled into my tea but didn't respond. I turned my phone off entirely and went to bed early, sleeping more soundly than I had in years. Monday morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful fall day in Minneapolis. While the rest of the city was heading to work, I made myself a leisurely breakfast, brewed a pot of my favorite tea, and settled on my small balcony with a book. Pickles joined me, sprawling across the small table in a patch of sunlight. At 9:37 a.m., my landline rang the number only a handful of people had. I let it go to voicemail. Sam, this is Mark Delaney. We have a situation at the office. None of our systems are working. CloudServe says they can't access the authentication protocols. Call me back immediately. At 10:15 a.m., another call. Sam, this is urgent. The entire system is locked down. All our computers are showing some kind of cat picture. Please call back. We're prepared to discuss consulting fees. I sipped my tea and turned the page of my book. At Bravura Communications, chaos reigned, according to Lila's texts, which I finally read around noon. Every computer in the office had booted up that morning to display the same image Pickles, sound asleep on my keyboard at home, with text underneath that read, "Your access is being managed by the new head of infrastructure. He is currently on a break. No one could log in. The biometric authentication system wasn't recognizing any fingerprints or passwords. Email was down. The CRM was inaccessible. Client files were locked. Even the smart coffee machine in the break room displayed Pickles' sleeping face. By 2 p.m., the local tech news site had picked up the story: Minneapolis marketing firm locked out by cat-run system. A Twitter hashtag was trending: Cat My IT Revenge. Someone from the office had leaked a photo of the screens, and the internet was having a field day. "This isn't sabotage, it's art," read one popular tweet. "Hire the cat and CIO immediately," suggested another. My phone continued to ring throughout the day. Mark's messages grew increasingly desperate, then threatening, then pleading, then desperate again. The CEO called twice. Even Tricia from HR left a message, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. I ignored them all, except for occasional texts to Lila, who kept me updated on the unfolding disaster with gleeful detail. They brought in 3 different IT consultants. She texted around 4 p.m. All of them say they've never seen anything like this. One of them actually laughed when he saw the authentication errors. By Tuesday morning, the story had made national tech news. "Marketing firm locked out of systems by former employee's cat" was the headline on TechCrunch. The article noted that while the company claimed sabotage, cybersecurity experts pointed out there was no evidence of malicious code or hacking. The system simply stopped accepting any form of authentication except, presumably, whatever the cat approved. I wasn't worried about legal threats. I hadn't installed any malicious software or backdoors. I hadn't sabotaged their systems. I had simply stopped maintaining the patchwork of fixes and workarounds that had kept their outdated infrastructure functioning. The biometric system had a known authentication drift issue that required manual recalibration every 72 hours, something I documented in 3 separate upgrade requests that had been denied due to budget constraints. Without that recalibration, the system defaulted to its fail-safe mode, complete lockdown, with the most recently used personal image file displayed on screen. In this case, a photo of Pickles I'd been using as a desktop background for months. On Wednesday afternoon, the CEO himself called my landline. "Ms. Lewis," he began formally. "This is Richard Klein, CEO of Bravura Communications. I understand there's been an unfortunate situation with your departure from the company." "My termination, you mean?" I corrected mildly. "Yes. Well?" He cleared his throat. "These decisions are never easy. But we find ourselves in need of your expertise. We're prepared to offer you a consulting contract at 5 times your former salary to resolve our current situation." I stroked Pickles, who had taken up residence on my lap. "Mr. Klein, I didn't do anything to your systems." "Of course not," he said quickly. "But you're clearly the only one who understands how they work. Name your price." "Ms. Lewis." I thought about it for a moment. "You know what the real problem is, Mr. Klein. It's not that you fired your only IT administrator. It's that you never understood what I actually did there. You thought it was a cost center, not the backbone of your entire operation. We recognize that now," he said, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. "That's why we're prepared to make this extremely generous offer." "You didn't value me when I was holding it all together," I replied calmly. "Now, you can hold it yourself." I hung up and blocked the number. On Thursday, Lila texted me a photo from the office. All the computer screens now displayed Pickles in a different pose, this time stretched out luxuriously on my keyboard with new text: "He accepts apologies in salmon pate only." I laughed out loud, startling Pickles from his nap. The authentication system must have cycled to the next image in its default protocol. I had a whole folder of Pickles photos that I'd occasionally used as backgrounds. The text, though that was unexpected, perhaps one of the consultants had a sense of humor. By Friday, 1 week after my termination, the story had evolved from a local curiosity to a nationwide cautionary tale about IT infrastructure and proper staff transitions. Industry forums were dissecting what they called the Pickles Protocol. analyzing how a seemingly straightforward authentication system could be so thoroughly dependent on one administrator's regular maintenance. Cybersecurity experts weighed in, most concluding that there was no evidence of deliberate sabotage, just a catastrophic failure to properly transition critical systems knowledge. Several pointed out that the company's refusal to upgrade their authentication system, despite documented risks, was the real issue. That afternoon, I received an email from a major tech company in the area, asking if I'd be interested in discussing a senior systems architecture position. The salary they mentioned was nearly triple what I'd been making at Bravura. The hiring manager noted they'd been following the pickles situation with interest and appreciated my obvious skills in creating robust, if maintenance-dependent, systems. Meanwhile, according to Lila, Bravura had resorted to working on personal laptops using Gmail accounts and storing files on unsecured cloud drives, exactly the kind of shadow IT practices I'd spent years trying to prevent. Mark's been telling clients it was a sophisticated cyber attack, she texted. Nobody believes him. On Saturday morning, I drove to the pet store and bought Pickles the deluxe window-mounted cat bed I'd been eyeing for months, but couldn't justify on my previous salary. He took to it immediately, positioning himself in the sunlight like a king surveying his domain. As I watched him dozing contentedly, I thought about the systems at Bravura, gradually deteriorating without the constant maintenance they required. By Monday, the backup server would likely fail completely. By Wednesday, email archives would start corrupting. By Friday, the CRM database would probably begin to fragment. None of this was sabotage. It was simply entropy doing what entropy does when no one is there to hold it back. For 11 years, I'd been the invisible force keeping digital chaos at bay. And they'd never understood that. They'd seen only the cost of my salary, not the value of my constant vigilance. My phone pinged with another text from Lila, day 6 of the feline takeover. New message on screens. Insufficient salmon detected. System purge imminent. Marketing team is placing actual salmon at the base of their monitors. I can't make this up. I laughed and sent her my first reply. Take pictures. That's going in my portfolio. As the second week of the Pickles protocol began, job offers started flooding in. The story had resonated with IT professionals nationwide, many of whom had experienced similar underappreciation. A popular tech podcast wanted to interview me. A cybersecurity firm offered me a consulting position to analyze authentication vulnerabilities. A major tech blog asked me to write a guest article on the human element in system stability. I declined the interview but accepted the consulting gig and agreed to write the article. As Pickles lounged in his new window bed, I began drafting an outline about invisible infrastructure and the false economy of cutting corners on IT security. On Wednesday of the second week, CloudServe publicly terminated their contract with Bravura, citing unprecedented system architecture incompatibilities and inadequate transition documentation. Their press release carefully avoided accepting any blame while making it clear they had been set up to fail. That same day, 3 more Bravura employees reached out to me for job references. The company was hemorrhaging talent as word spread about the management's incompetence. By Friday, exactly 2 weeks after my termination, I received a formal letter from Bravura's legal team. It carefully avoided accusing me of any wrongdoing while requesting my voluntary assistance in restoring their systems, in exchange for an appropriate consulting fee to be mutually agreed upon. I drafted a response with the help of a lawyer friend, outlining my consulting terms, triple my former hourly rate, payment upfront for a minimum of 80 hours, and a public company statement acknowledging that no sabotage had occurred, just a failure to properly maintain critical systems after my departure. Also, I added at the end, I'll need a formal apology delivered with 1 pound of premium salmon pate. Not for me, for the cat. 3 days later, Mark Delaney himself appeared at my door, looking haggard and sleep-deprived. In his hands was a shopping bag from an upscale pet store containing numerous tins of the most expensive salmon pate on the market. I can't believe I'm bringing gourmet cat food to my former IT admin, he muttered as I invited him in. Pickles watched from his window perch, regal and unimpressed. "The legal team approved your terms," Mark said, handing me an envelope along with the pet store bag. Though they thought the salmon thing was some kind of joke. "Did you tell them it wasn't?" I asked, examining the contract inside the envelope. "I don't know what it is anymore," he admitted, looking defeated. "All I know is we're losing clients every day this continues. The company might not survive another week." I signed the contract and handed it back to him. "I'll start tomorrow. Remote work only." "Whatever you need," he agreed quickly. "Just fix it." After he left, I opened one of the salmon pâté tins for Pickles, who deigned to leave his window throne to investigate the offering. "What do you think, head of infrastructure?" I asked as he delicately sampled the pate. "Are we satisfied with their apology?" Pickles purred loudly, whiskers dotted with salmon. The next day, I began the process of restoring Bravura's systems, carefully documenting every step for the new IT team they would eventually need to hire. The authentication system required a complete reset and recalibration. The backup server needed a manual restart and verification sequence. Dozens of custom scripts had to be reactivated and updated. Within 3 days, most critical systems were functioning again. Within a week, everything was back to normal, or as normal as it could be for a company that had just experienced what industry blogs were now calling the Great Feline Lockout of 2023. True to the agreement, Bravura issued a public statement confirming that no sabotage had occurred, just an unfortunate transition oversight that highlighted the critical importance of proper IT infrastructure maintenance. By the time my consulting contract ended, I had accepted a position as head of system architecture at the tech company that had first reached out to me, with a salary and benefits package that made my Bravura compensation look like pocket change. My first project would be designing a more robust authentication system, one that wouldn't display cat photos when it failed. As for Bravura, they hired 3 IT professionals to replace me, finally acknowledging that a single administrator couldn't possibly handle all the responsibilities I'd been juggling for years. According to Lila, who'd been promoted during the chaos, the new team spent their first month just trying to understand all the systems I'd built and maintained. Pickles, for his part, seemed wholly unimpressed by his brief fame as the face of corporate IT revenge. He continued to sleep on keyboards, lounge in his window bed, and demand premium salmon at regular intervals now with the added authority of someone who had, however briefly, brought a company to its knees. Sometimes, when I'm working late at my new job, Pickles will still drape himself across my keyboard, purring contentedly. And I'll smile, remembering that for 2 chaotic weeks, every screen at Bravura Communications showed his sleeping face a reminder that sometimes the most essential systems depend on the most overlooked people, and on their cats,